Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook and today, Pod 24, I'll be looking at a result over Watford by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you an exclusive interview with Sam Allardyce, Scott Dan and Johan Cabaye after the game. So let's begin. Sam Allardyce took charge of his first Palace game at Watford on Boxing Day, but had to contend with more injuries to the Palace squad, as both James McArthur and Joe Ledley were added to an already long list of players unavailable. The home side made two changes to the lineup following their single goal defeat in the last outing at Sunderland. A bad start for Watford on just 2 minutes saw Darren Yanmat had to be stretchered off the field, and he was replaced by Carmelo Zongo. A foul on Wilfried Zaha just outside the box gave Palace an early chance, as Johan Cabaye played a free kick into the box, but it was deflected out for a corner, one of a number of corners the visitors had in the opening 5 minutes of the contest. Only 14 minutes into the game and the home side had used two substitutes, as Valon Barami had to leave proceedings with an injury and was replaced by Troy Deeney. A minute later and Christian Benteke caused Gomes into a save as he headed an Andros Townsend cross towards the goal, but the effort lacked power and it was an easy save for the keeper. Cabaye was then inches away from giving the side the lead when a ball came to him just outside the box after good work from Benteke, but it was not long before the Frenchman had his name on the scoresheet. The breakthrough did come, and on 25 minutes Andros Townsend did some great work down the right to clear his man, and then he found Cabaye in space, and he made no mistake in slotting the ball into net from outside the box, past Gomes to give the Eagles the advantage. On 35 minutes, Palace had a chance to increase the lead after Christian Benteke was fouled in the box by Gomes, but the same player who got up to take the spot kick had his efforts saved as the keeper dived to his left and pushed the shot away. The first half penalty save meant Palace missed a chance to go into the break with a solid advantage, but at the other end, the home side failed to force Wayne Hennessy into a first half save. Watford started the second half with the majority of possession, but it was only a cross from Adelaine Guardiola that Hennessy had to come and claim before the action was back at the other end of the pitch. Townsend curled a shot over the bar from the edge of the box, and then a cross from Puncheon in front of goal was just too long for Benteke to get on the end of. On 58 minutes, Igalo had the best chance for the home side of the game so far as he beat his man to get a shot in goal, but he didn't trouble Hennessy as the effort went well wide of the target. Referee Mark Clattenburg awarded a second spot kick of the game with 20 minutes remaining, as Sebastian Prodl was alleged to have been fouled by Delaney. Delaney stepped up to fire the ball past Hennessy to bring the scores level and score his 100th goal of his Watford career. At the other end, Dan headed over the bar from a punching cross before two changes were made by Sam Allardyce, with Jordan Much and Fraser Campbell joining the game for the remainder. A late call for another penalty came from the visitors as Zaha went down in the box, but the officials gave the free kick to the other way and cautioned the Palace winger. That was all about it for the action at Vicarage Road, and the game finished level. Sam Allardyce won't be too displeased with his first game in charge as Crystal Palace manager. His side began the game as the better side and took the lead midway through the first half, but things quickly turned when Christian Benteke's penalty was saved by Gomes, and midway through the second half, Watford drew level with a spot kick of their own, following a foul by Delaney on Sebastian Prodl. Now for some positives from the game. In the first half especially, Palace played with an intensity and a resemblance of organisation that was highlighted to have been missing under Alan Pardew. Allardyce opted to start Johan Cabaye in a more advanced role and brought Andros Townsend back into the lineup. Both players excelled along with Wilfried Zaha. Now some negatives from the game. It was a tale of two penalties. Benteke's miss was another shambolic attempt at being too smart, with what is ultimately a simple procedure. At the opposite end, Delaney's foul was so obvious that referee Mark Clattenburg couldn't ignore it. The Sam Allardyce era at Crystal Palace started with a point as the Eagles drew 1-1 away at Watford on Boxing Day. Johan Cabaye gave Palace a deserved lead in the first half with his second goal in 2 games against Watford at Vicarage Road, and Christian Benteke missed a penalty, his second miss of the season, as the Eagles looked to make their dominance count. But they were denied victory as Troy Deeney scored his 100th goal for Watford in the second half, with the Hornet striker blasting the ball home from the penalty spot to earn his side a point. So what do we learn from the game? Here are 5 things we picked up at Vicarage Road. Number 1. Talk of the town. Andros Townsend came back into the side for Sam Allardyce's first game in charge, and the former Tottenham and Newcastle United man started in his preferred position on the right wing, with Wilfried Zaha starting on the left. And it seemed to suit Townsend, who got the ball and looked to threat, while he fed Yohan Cabaye for the opener with a delightful bit of play. Number 2. All about Zaha. Watford fans have clearly not forgotten about the playoff final from 2013, when Wilfried Zaha won the penalty that Kevin Phillips scored to send Palace back to the Premier League. He also won the penalty in a corresponding fixture at Vicarage Road last season, as Palace won 1-0 with Yohan Cabaye on target. And Zaha was booed every time he touched the ball by the home faithful. He was booked for what referee Mark Clattenburg deemed to be a dive late on, and he was mocked by the home mascot Harry the Hornet at the final whistle. Number 3. A sting in the tail. It wasn't a great start for Watford, with the Hornets losing both Darren Yanmat and Varane Barami to injury in the first 15 minutes, and then falling behind to Yohan Cabaye's opener. But Christian Benteke's penalty miss changed the mood among the home fans, and Watford came back in the second half to equalise, with Troy Deeney scoring from the penalty spot. Number 4. Allardyce's not quite broken record. New Crystal Palace boss Sam Allardyce has an unwanted record when it comes to Premier League fixtures on Boxing Day. With 7 defeats on Boxing Day in the top flight, he's lost more than any other manager. But while he didn't see his new side here claim a victory, at least he didn't see them lose to add to that record. And number 5, a mixed afternoon. It is often the case that you see a reaction from the players when there is a new manager in charge, and that was certainly the case here in the first half, with several players stepping up with some fine performances, no more so than Andros Townsend and Yohan Cabaye, who both were superb early on and combined for the Eagles' opener. But Palace were not as positive in the second half, and Watford battled back into the game for a point. So now you've had the match review, we're now going to move on to the player rankings. But before we start, don't forget to follow us across social media on Twitter and Facebook at @eCrystalPalace for all the latest news. And for all you Facebook users out there, don't forget to check out our Facebook group so you can join in with the latest discussions, read the latest news and post your own opinion. So like I said there, if you are on social media and you do want to get in contact with us, then of course you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook, and you can find them using the @eCrystalPalace. Now obviously I highly recommend you do join these groups or follow these pages, because we do regularly update you with the latest news, and that is including transfer rumours, obviously with the run up to the January transfer window. So if you do want to keep up to date with all things Palace, including player and manager interviews, and obviously just having a say in our Twitter polls, then obviously I'd recommend you do follow us. Also, if you are on Facebook, I would highly recommend you do join the Facebook group, which you can find using the @eCrystalPalace group @. Now, obviously, I would recommend you do join the group, because after the game, quite a lot of fans go on there to post their opinion on how the game went, anything they saw about the game, and obviously on players and how they thought the players felt. And obviously, you can go on there. It doesn't have to be after the game. You can actually post anything else you would like to discuss with other fans. So if you do obviously want to have your say on the game, or have your say on a player or a transfer rumour, or just have a look and hear what other fans had to say after the game, then of course you can join our Facebook group. And much like the other social media groups on Twitter and obviously the main Facebook page, we do regularly update it with the latest news. So obviously you can have your say on it, but also you can read the latest news and keep up to date with all things Palace. So obviously if you do want to follow or join any of these social media groups, then check the links in the description below, both on the YouTube video and the podcast on iTunes and Acast. If you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then of course you can drop a comment below the video on what you thought about the game and who you thought a standout player was, obviously the man of the match. And obviously we do want to hear what you had to say about the game and who you thought the best player was. And of course feel free to drop a comment below the video. Now obviously in the last few weeks I've set a challenge for listeners to do, and quite a few people have started to do it. And I've just asked people to list their player rankings and give me ratings of 1 to 10 for each of the players. Obviously 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. And obviously that is just a sort of you describing how you thought the players performed throughout the game. So this week, like every week, I want you to do the same thing. So drop a comment below the video with your player rankings. So obviously all of the starting 11 and the substitutes, and giving them ratings from 1 to 10 of, you know, what you thought or how you thought they performed throughout the game. And obviously by doing that, I can compare my ratings of the players to your ratings and actually see whether our sort of outlook was on the game, and whether we thought the players had sort of similar performances, put in the same or the similar amount of effort. So, do feel free to comment below your player rankings and compare it to mine, but also just feel free to drop below, the comment on the video about who you thought the man of the match was, so the player with the biggest influence of the game, and just anything, about the game in general. But, I've said this already, if you do want to keep up to date with all things Palace, then of course don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. But enough of that now to go on to the player rankings. But before we start, if you do want to hear my opinion on our new manager, Sam Allardyce, then check out the last podcast, which I believe is Pod 23. And obviously on there I do discuss his appointment and obviously the sacking of Alan Pardew and what these two things will mean for Palace this season and how pivotal they will be to our success this year. But obviously if you do want to comment below with what you think about Allardyce, then please do. But if you do want to hear my opinion, like I said, do go on to the previous podcast. But obviously back onto the player rankings, starting in goal with Wayne Hennessy, who I'm going to give a 7. Made some routine saves but didn't really have a great deal to do as he was hardly troubled. Some indecision during the game caused a bit of panic, but Watford didn't really threaten the goal a great deal. So obviously Wayne Hennessy, I've given him a 7 because once again it was a very solid performance from him. And before I go on to talk about what he'd done in his performance, I'm just going to say the same thing as I say every week. Obviously Hennessy came back into the squad, with Steve Mandanda getting injured, and Mandanda was doing pretty well when Pardew put him in the goal, but actually Hennessy came back into the squad and he's actually doing a pretty decent job. And this game is a classic example of that. Yes, he didn't make any fantastic saves, but that's because he was never really troubled by Watford, and because Palace contained them defensively so much, Watford were only really troubled, or they could only have long shots, which obviously Hennessy did deal with. So actually, Hennessy's come into the squad, Pardew put him in there, and Allardyce has continued to put him back into the goal. And actually, we could say that actually he's a pretty decent replacement. He's stepped up to the plate, he's upped his game, and actually he deserves to be the first team goalkeeper. In this game again, a classic example of that. Yes, he didn't make fantastic saves like I've already said, but he made routine saves, and this is what you want of a keeper of his ability. We know he's a good keeper, he's an international keeper for Wales. We know he can make these saves. In this game, a classic example of that. And when you talk about players keeping you in games, certainly I think we could say Hennessy did, because he made saves at crucial periods, but also made the routine saves. So when corners were coming in, he's making himself big to go and claim them, which he wasn't good last season, but he's obviously worked on it. So we can see how his game's improving. And although Watford didn't really trouble him, because like I said, we contained them quite a lot, Hennessy, when he had to make the save, he'd done that. And that's what you want of a goalkeeper. You don't always want a keeper like De Gea who makes fantastic saves. That's good, that's fantastic. But also you want someone who can do the basics right. And Hennessy done this. And I've said this every week, and I'll keep saying it. At the moment, I think it's going to be very hard for Steve Mandanda to get back into the squad unless he does something fantastic in training, because it'd be hard on Hennessy, because Hennessy's actually done pretty well, making these saves, making blocks and things like this. And we've talked about him not having good communication with the defence. Obviously Allardyce was only at the club for 2 days, so he couldn't really do too much about organising the defence. But actually, Hennessy commanding the back line, I think the communication there was pretty good as well. And obviously we talk about Hennessy, he's not the best goalkeeper in the world, and we all know that, because indecision, that's something that's in his game, and maybe it's something that might go out of his game in the next few months, maybe years. And that's the only thing really to criticise him for. Yes, he claims some of the corners, but sometimes he doesn't know whether he's going to jump for it, whether he's just going to sort of punch out the air, or whether he's going to stand in his line. Sometimes when counter-attacks on from the other team, especially Watford, who counter quite a lot, he doesn't know whether to stay on his line or go forward to claim the ball. So that sort of indecision made us panic quite a lot throughout the game, because we don't know whether he's going to stay on the line and they might have to try and go one-on-one with him. We don't know whether he's going to go forward and claim the ball, and then someone would have to go back on the line in case the ball goes there to clear it. So that sort of indecision could have cost him a few times throughout the game. But to be honest, that indecision happened once or twice, and because Watford weren't really threatening us a lot, it meant that it didn't really cost us, let's say. But certainly Wayne Hennessy, a 7 from him, a very good performance. One of the key players in us getting the point, because he kept us in the game for so much. And with the penalty, if you look back at the replay, although he dived the wrong way and Delaney went down the middle, he almost got his foot to it. So you could say if he had done that, that would have been a very good save, because Hennessy initially didn't plan to save it, but he could have saved it if he put his foot higher, but he wasn't expecting it to go there. So, Wayne Hennessy, a very good game from him, a 7 from him, and hopefully he can maintain his spot in the team as first team goalkeeper and progress into an even better goalkeeper. Obviously, moving on to the defence, starting with Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 7. Nothing outstanding, just continued to do his job out of position. Handled the threat of Amrabat with composure. So obviously, Joe Ward here, I've given him a 7. There isn't really much to talk about him other than the fact that he was a lot better than he's been in past weeks. And the word or the phrase I used to describe it really was nothing outstanding. We talk about defenders doing the simple things right. And I've said this in previous weeks, it's all about defenders. They need to make tackles, make blocks. and that's what Joe Ward done. And although he didn't do anything spectacular, you know, he didn't put crosses into the area, he didn't sort of make a fantastic tackle. Like I said, he done the basic things right, and that's what's good about his performance, and that's why I've given him the 7. The fact that he didn't do anything special, nothing outstanding, but the fact he done the basic jobs right. And the thing we must mention is, yes, you could say it's not good that he's doing fantastic things and he's doing simple things and he's sort of being average, but actually he's doing the job out of position, and we must bear that in mind. You know, he's normally a right back, but he's playing a left back to enable Martin Kelly to play in his preferred position, and obviously that's meant that Kelly has improved a lot, and it's mean that Joe Ward hasn't been as effective. I mean, we can understand that, and we can understand why he's not outstanding, is because he's out of position. But although he was out of position, much like Wayne Hennessy, he's done a pretty decent job, and that's why I've given him the 7. You know, the main threat he had to deal with was Amrabat, sort of on that left-hand side, that left flank, and actually he dealt with it quite well, because if you look back at the game, Amrabat, much like the whole defence, they kept their main key players, Watford's players, quite quiet, and Amrabat, Joe Ward done a pretty good job at, you know, keeping his threat contained. But, you know, I've given him a 7, because I've said this already, a pretty average performance from him, nothing outstanding, but like all of the defenders, they're now starting to creep it back into their game, just doing the basic things right. It's not about doing fancy defending, it's about keeping it simple. And the word I used, the phrase, was if in doubt, hoof it out. Well, all of the defence really, you know, that's what they've done throughout this game. There was none of this panic to try and dribble out of danger. When you've got the ball, clear it. And as Joe Ward's on the flank, he's normally, and we've seen this in past games, he's normally the one to clear the ball. But certainly a 7 from him. Certainly a decent performance from him defensively. Nothing outstanding, but hopefully he can continue to have a more offensive presence in the next few games, as we know he can do. Obviously, moving on now to Delaney, who I'm going to give a 6. Gave away a frustrating penalty and left some people reckoning he will lose his place come January if Allardyce brings in a new centre-back. But other than that, he did a decent job against Troy Deeney. So obviously, Delaney here, I've given him a 6, because although he done a pretty good job defensively, like the whole team, you know, the penalty was quite frustrating. And we talked about, you know, the new rules in the Premier League and the fact that we've been quite hard. We've got penalties where they were quite soft, and we've not got penalties where it probably was a stonewall penalty. And in this game, you know, as much as we all hate Mark Clattenburg, he played by the rules, and most referees won't play to the new rules because for whatever reason they don't want consistency, and they decide when and if they want to play new rules. But the new rules say that especially when you've got a corner, if there's any sort of tugging in the box, that's an automatic penalty. And Mark Clattenburg, credit where credit's due, he's actually one of the referees who's actually played this rule. And obviously that's what's quite frustrating about Delaney's game, because he had a pretty decent game defensively, but when the corner came in, he forgot about the new rule and decided to drag the player back, and obviously got the penalty. And I talked about the penalty already. Wayne Hennessy didn't save it, so if Delaney hadn't have fouled the player, then we wouldn't have conceded that, and we probably would have gone to win the game. And to be honest, the fact that he's, you know, gave away the penalty made Allardyce quite angry, and you've heard that in Allardyce's interview, the fact that he was quite frustrated with the fact we could have won the game if Delaney wouldn't have made the foul. It just shows that maybe Allardyce may be thinking about, you know, shipping Delaney out of the team if he chooses to get a new centre-back in January. So we've heard Allardyce already saying that in January we probably need 2 or 3 players, which is fine, that's fine. But if he brings in a new player, maybe Delaney may be one of the ones to suffer, because in the sort of 2 or 3 games that Allardyce has seen, you know, Delaney playing, he hasn't done fantastic. So hopefully he can improve, go back to his normal self, use his experience. But certainly his place is in real danger, because if you upset the manager by doing a silly thing like grabbing hold of a player, he's going to think about dropping you. But certainly we do need another centre-back. So if Allardyce chooses to bring another centre-back or a left-back, maybe Delaney may lose his place. But like I said already, other than sort of the frustrating penalty that he gave away, and he should have been more aware, he's actually done a pretty decent job, much like the whole defence. And I am going to keep repeating myself, because we know Allardyce is sort of a more defensive manager, and actually we saw this in this game. And yes, he only had 2 days to sort of organise the defence, so he couldn't have had that much impact. But we've seen in this game a massive improvement from the last game, where actually the defence played quite well, and the main sort of person to pinpoint Delaney for marking, Troy Deeney. Yes, Troy Deeney got his 100th goal for Watford, but Delaney, you know, marked him well like he normally does, and actually made sure, like the whole defence, he got limited to a few chances. But certainly a 6 for Delaney, a good solid defensive performance from him, but he did give away that frustrating penalty, which if it wasn't scored, we would have gone on to win the game. Obviously moving on now to the captain, Scott Dann, who I'm going to give a 7. Despite being unwell with flu, he somehow played the whole game. Hats off to him. He faced down Agarlo and restricted him to shots from distance. Looked to be a threat as well from set pieces. So obviously Scott Dan here, the captain, I've given him a 7. I can't highlight it enough. You know, the defence was fantastic throughout this game. And yes, we did go on to draw the game, but actually, considering how bad we've been defensively in the last few games, there was a lot more organisation about the defence, and you could say it's due to the new manager coming in and sort of resetting up the defence, but actually I think the captain is quite crucial to that. And obviously we talk about players being unwell and not being fit. You know, Scott Dan, he's had injuries, he's come back from injuries, he was doing fine, but now he's got the flu like most people, you know. Not just footballers, but everyone gets flu, and obviously Scott Dan's been unlucky enough to get the flu, and although he had the flu and he was unwell and apparently he threw up on the pitch, he played the whole game, and hats off to him, because you know, most players, if they had a runny bloody nose or they were being sick on the pitch, they would probably go off and get substituted and get sort of treated in the treatment room. But obviously Scott Dan didn't. He played on for the whole game, and you know, congratulations to him, because he showed his resilience to actually go through that problem. And to be honest, like I said already, he done a pretty decent job, and much like Delaney had to sort of mark Troy Deeney mainly because Watford were playing sort of 2 up front. Scott Dan had the job of marking Garlo, and he was a pretty lethal striker last year, and actually Scott Dan done pretty well at restricting him, and he only restricted him to shots from distance, much like the rest of the team. You know, defensively, we were pretty solid, very organised, so it meant that Watford found it very hard to break us down, and when they did break us down, they could only take shots from far. And once again, that just goes back to Hennessy. Hennessy was able to control the situation by making saves or making blocks from them long distance strikes. But obviously we talk about in the last few weeks, Scott Dan, he hasn't really been that effective from set pieces. He hasn't been his normal self, and obviously we know why, because he's been unwell. But actually in this game, considering he was unwell, he still looked a threat from set pieces. So when some of the deliveries were coming in from Punch and Kabai, pretty good deliveries from them, so credits where credits due to the people who delivered the ball in. But obviously Scott Dan, he did get his head, or at least had a threat from a few set pieces. And we talk about headering threat, attacking or an offensive wise. Scott Dan, once again, I say this for the defence, a very good solid defensive performance from us, and obviously using his headering ability as well. But much like the whole defence, and I'll keep repeating this, went back to basics, made tackles, make blocks, and that sort of organisation and that sort of skill to do the basic things right meant that we came through the game, you know, drawing the game and not losing the game. And I think, you know, hopefully Sam Allardyce, being a defensive manager, can hopefully turn all of our defensive players even better, because with his experience that Sam Allardyce has got, he can make our defenders, who are pretty good already, but he can make them into even better players. And obviously after the game, Scott Dan came out on the official Crystal Palace website with sort of a lovely interview, and he said we have to take the positives from the game. So though it was quite negative in the fact that we gave away our 1-0 lead due to a sloppy penalty, you know, there's still positives to take from the game. The fact that we were so good defensively, the fact that we were much better defensively, organisation, everything like that. And Scott Dan, as the captain, he's identified that. So hopefully him talking with the new manager Sam Allardyce, with all of the sort of management staff, hopefully, you know, they can see the positives and try and implement them into the next game, as well as looking at what went wrong in the game against Watford and sort of trying to improve that into the next game. But certainly a 7 for Scott Dan, a very good defensive performance from him, and although he had the flu, he did battle on throughout the whole game, and hats off to him for doing that, because most players would probably go off, get some treatment for that, but he played on, and it just showed his resilience once again. So now moving on to the final player of the defence, and that is Martin Kelly, who I am going to give a 6. Appears to be much more comfortable on the right, and that showed with another decent performance. So obviously Martin Kelly here, there isn't really much to say about him, because much like Joe Ward on the other flank, he done a pretty decent job, and he done nothing outstanding. So there was no sort of notable crosses he put into the area, there was no notable last ditch tackles he made, but actually, much like the whole defence, and especially Joe Ward on the other flank, he put a decent solid sort of defensive performance in. And you know, we talk about defenders going back to basics, and we've sort of seen that more as the few weeks have progressed. And obviously Allardyce, being a defensive manager, he's come in, he's obviously implemented some defensive training, and we've seen the difference already. You know, Martin Kelly, although yes, he's better on the right hand side, he was much better, the best maybe he's been all season, because he managed to contain the threat of Watford very well, and you know, there isn't really much to say about him because it was a very average performance from him. You know, he'd done his job, so he didn't do anything bad, he didn't do anything good, he just done what he was there to do, and what he was there to do was to protect the lead, or to protect Palace, to make sure we wouldn't lose the game, and he'd done that. You know, once again, making blocks, making tackles, all the things you want defenders to do. And although he, like Ward, he didn't do anything outstanding, he didn't go forward, he wasn't offensive, he didn't put crosses in, although he didn't do that, he's still done what his job was. And obviously we know Sam Allardyce, he likes to play with his back four, you know, they're defensive, and although Prodl played with sort of offensive fullbacks, maybe under Sam Allardyce we will see a more sort of defensive performances from both our fullbacks, from Joe Ward and Martin Kelly, because that's what Sam Allardyce likes to play, and maybe that will be better for us, because then that won't leave us exposed by the counter-attack, because both of our fullbacks are pushing up quite high. But certainly a 6 for Martin Kelly. There isn't really much to say about his performance, because, you know, he's playing on the right now, he's much more comfortable, he's putting in decent performances every week, quite consistent with the way he performs, and to be honest, another decent performance from him. You know, I've given him a 6 because it was a very average performance. He's done nothing outstanding, but hopefully in the next few games against Watford, against Swansea, hopefully he can try and be a bit more of an offensive sort of target throughout the game, so we can try and, you know, get balls to him, try and create chances from the left and right foot we know he's got. But certainly a 6 is a fair result for him. Obviously moving on to the midfield now, starting with, well, there's a bit of debate really about this, and I won't go into too much detail about our formation. Obviously we do play with sort of 3 or 4-3-3, let's say, and sort of a variation of that, with, so you've got your back four, your 3 midfielders and your 3 attackers. But in this game you could almost say it was maybe the more classic a 4-2-3-1, or maybe at times really it felt like in the game it was more like a 4-1-4-1 formation. But you know, obviously Jason Puncheon, Matthew Flamini, Yohan Cabaye, they were sort of the midfield 3, you know, so if it was a 4-3-3 they were sort of the 3 in midfield. But actually I thought that Yohan Cabaye, I thought that Jason Puncheon and Matthew Flamini sort of played the defensive role, which allowed Yohan Cabaye, which we haven't seen from him this season, to play in a more advanced role, what actually meant that he got the goal. But certainly starting with the sort of defensive midfielder throughout the game, obviously Jason Puncheon, who I'm going to give a 6. Played in a slightly deeper role, Puncheon had a tough game against Eddie Nketiah, but showed focus and determination. No threat and goal through the middle, and was pushed out on the left in the second half. He needs to do more, or Allardyce could bring in a new playmaker. So obviously I'm just going to touch a little bit on that final note. And obviously we talk about Allardyce, he's come into the squad, and obviously this is not his squad he's built. So all of the new signings that Prodl brought in, all of the sort of players Prodl inherited, you know, they're not Allardyce's players, and Allardyce may not like to play with some of these players. And obviously the January transfer window is opening, so Allardyce is going to have the chance to bring in new players. And obviously Jason Puncheon, he didn't pull up strings in this game, he wasn't fantastic, he wasn't looking to be the playmaker we know he can be. And if he continues to not, you know, we know how good he is, if he continues to be sort of under par, maybe Allardyce will bring in someone new, maybe someone more creative midfielder who he knows can be consistent. We know Puncheon, he's a very good player. Some days he can be unplayable, that he can be the unplayable playmaker in the team. No one can stop him finding passes, having shots. But in this game, it was a sort of a lacklustre performance. He wasn't as good as he normally could be. And obviously Allardyce is not his player, so maybe Puncheon may lose his place if Allardyce chooses to bring in another player. But certainly, you know, he played in a more deeper role, so we can't expect him to do the playmaking role which he normally does. And although, you know, he didn't have that chance, he's still done a pretty good job defensively. And once again, that's just relating back to how good we were defensively. You know, the last few weeks we've been pretty bad defensively, conceding goals, just leaking in goals. Allardyce has come in, we've improved significantly defensively, and I think Jason Puncheon, Matthew Flamini, given that sort of cover in front of the back line, just helps to get a bit more help to the back line and puts them under less pressure, because they've got people covering on them, so they're not sort of in one-on-one situations. And to be honest, you know, Etienne Capoue has been pretty good this season and last season, one of the main players for Watford. You know, but Jason Puncheon, in that defensive role, he kept his threat to a minimum. You know, he kept him quite contained, and although it was quite tough for him, because it was quite a physical battle, let's say, Jason Puncheon did pretty well on that, and that just shows in the fact that Etienne Capoue didn't really have as much impact on the game for Watford as he would have liked. And we talk about Puncheon being the playmaker, being one of the most positive players for Palace. You know, he did show that he was focused on the game, he knew what the game plan was, he went out to do it, and obviously that was him playing in that deeper role, and the determination. You know, he didn't stop, he carried on till the end, putting in as much effort to give to the team, and we see that throughout the game, and that's what you want of players of his ability. We know players who love the club, Zaha, Puncheon, they've been here since they were younger, they've got sort of the love for the club, and we saw that in this game. The determination from Puncheon to continue do everything he could for the team did show in the game. And I talked about this already, you know, where he was playing in a deeper role, protecting the back line, doing his defensive work. He didn't really have any goal threat, and even though when he was moved out wide in the second half, playing on the left, he didn't really get many crosses in, didn't really have that much impact. So he didn't really have much impact offensively, but the main game plan which he had to focus on was defensive work, and he done that very well. But certainly a 6 from him, you know, not the best we've seen from Puncheon, but where he's playing a more deeper role now towards the end of his career, maybe, you know, as he's getting older, he's getting slower, so maybe he's moved back to a more defensive role to do a job there, and he's certainly done a job, but certainly a 6 from him because he didn't have as much impact as he would have liked. Obviously moving on to his partner now, Matthew Flamini, who I'm going to give a 7. As against Manchester United, Flamini brought a cool head to Palace's defensive play, looked assured, comfortable and held the midfield well. Give him a run of games and we could start to see a decent signing until the end of the season. So Matthew Flamini here, I've given him a 7 because once again, as against Manchester United a few weeks ago, it was a very solid defensive performance. Remember, we knew that when Flamini came in the summer, we knew that it was a pretty decent signing because we knew that we were bringing in a player with Premier League experience. I think it was over maybe 200 games with Arsenal, so he had the experience here. And in this game, and against Manchester United, he showed that. And, you know, the thing I like about the way Flamini plays, he brings a cool head to Palace. So obviously, using his experience of playing with likes or with Arsenal, you know, he's very cool about the game. You know, he doesn't get frustrated when things don't go his way. Whenever we're on the attack or we're defending, you know, he knows what to do because he's cool. He knows what to do to deal with the threat or what to do to help the team. So actually, I think his experience helped quite a lot. We've seen that against Manchester United and we thought maybe it's a one-off game, but he brought that sort of consistency, that sort of coolness back into the other game. And we talk about him playing alongside Puncheon in a defensive role. He'd done that defensive work very well, and he looked assured, so there was never any time where he looked uncomfortable on the ball. You know, he never gave away possession, never missed a tackle. He looked assured, he knew what the game plan was, he knew what he had to do. And also, he looks comfortable. So I've said that already. You know, when he had the ball, he wouldn't panic and just offload the ball, pass it back. He would actually try and look for a pass or try and make a few yards. So actually, he's pretty good in that sense as well, going forward. And obviously, held the midfield well. So we talk about players playing the anchor role. Matthew Flamini and Jason Puncheon, classic examples of that. You know, they play slightly deeper than the other ones, almost at times as another centre-back, just to give cover to the back line. And Matthew Flamini done that pretty well because he held the team together playing in that role. And to be honest, yes, he's quite old and it's took him quite a long time to sort of get back up to fitness. But actually, if we give him a few run of games, you know, we give him 2 or 3 games on the bounce, he could regain his confidence and actually he could start to be a decent signing because we know with the experience he's got that he's a pretty decent player. He's done a lot of stuff for Flamini, especially a goal against Brighton. I saw, you know, we've seen what he can do, but now if we give him a run of games, hopefully he can build up his confidence and his fitness, obviously crucially, and then become a better player. But certainly I've given him a 7 because once again, as against Manchester United, it was a very assured, comfortable performance from him, playing that ankle role really well and just having a cool sort of influence on the team defensively just to make sure that we can keep firm as a team and obviously not concede too many goals. Obviously, moving on now to sort of the attacking midfielder, let's say, Johan Cabaye, who I'm going to give an 8.
You used to play in black and white, I don't know why. Ooh, then plays in red and blue, Johan Cabaye. Now scoring goals for fun, I don't know why. Hey, Johan Cabaye, Johan Cabaye, Johan Cabaye. You used to play in black and white. I don't know why. Ooh, now he plays in red and blue.
Played in a more advanced role, Cabaye showed his class with a perfectly timed run and finish to put Palace in front. The midfield was combative, creative and constantly looking for the ball. So obviously Johan Cabaye here, I've talked about it already, him playing in a more advanced role, and actually he had a pretty decent game and that's why I've given him the 8. Now obviously when he came to Palace we thought he was going to play originally in an attacking role, but actually he ended up playing most of last season and the beginning of this season in a defensive role. But obviously with Alan Pardew trying to change the way we play, trying to play a more expansive style of football, you know, he was pushed forward more, and obviously Sam Allardyce has seen this in training, always heard about it from the playing stuff, and actually continued to play Johan Cabaye in a more advanced role, and it actually fitted quite well because we saw at Newcastle, we saw at PSG, you know, Johan Cabaye can make an impact, yes, defensively, but offensively he was very good, and actually he showed his class, so we know how good he is. And although when he's playing defensively, he doesn't get the chance to show how good he is offensively. But in this game, He had a perfect chance to do it, and he took it perfectly. So obviously, Andros Townsend, lovely flick on and lovely skill down the right hand flank. Got the ball to Cabaye. Cabaye timed his run exactly perfectly right, so it was onside. So he got all of that right, and the finish as well, just to tuck it past the goalkeeper into the bottom left hand corner, just shows the skill he's got. The fact that he's aware of his surroundings and can get on the end of a ball whilst being onside, and the fact that he's also got, you know, the finish on him, the boot, where actually when he's on the one-on-one situation with the keeper, he can find the ball. And actually that was quite crucial to Palace, because managers normally say that getting the first goal is quite crucial. Obviously in this game it was, because it was the goal that got us in front. And to be honest, we talk about midfielders, you know, they need to be quite firm, they need to be quite aware of what's happening about the pitch, because they need to create for teammates, they need to defend. You know, Yohan Cabaye did that. You know, he was very combative, so so obviously battling with other players. So yes, he was playing a more advanced role, but when he had to go back and defend, you know, he'd have a little battle with players, try to use his physicality to get the player off the ball, and that's the same when he's going forward. The fact that he has to get through all the players to get on the end of Andros Townsend's pass, so that shows how good he was. Creative as well, you know, the fact that he, from his set pieces deliveries were fantastic. The fact that he can get the ball over the wall, or the fact that he can get the ball up in the air with enough height and enough whip to get to players. So that creativity, you know, added to Palace's game. And also the fact that he's aware, I've talked about him being aware, but he's constantly looking for the ball. So whenever he's not in possession, he's always looking for space. He's always looking to position himself in an area where he can get on the end of the ball. So once again, just showing his class. The fact that he can, you know, use his physicality, his combatism, let's say, I make my own word up. He can use that sort of strength to, you know, as his advantage to get past players. He's also creative in the fact that he can put in decent set piece deliveries and also looking for the ball. So we talk about players being good on the ball, like punching, they can do stuff with the ball. But Yohan Cabaye, yes, he's good on the ball and creative, but when he didn't have the ball, he was looking for the ball, looking into positions, and obviously he was rewarded with that sort of a spatial awareness, with the fact that when he saw Andros Townsend cross coming in, he was able to position himself just onside to get the goal. But certainly an 8 for Yohan Cabaye, a very good performance from him, and hopefully we can see a new Yohan Cabaye, the one we signed, where he's playing in a more advanced role. Hopefully he can bag a few more goals this season, you know, by running into the box. And, you know, we know what he can do. We know he's got good shooting. And hopefully with him playing in that more advanced role, he could get more chance to do that. But certainly, he's showing what a signing he is. You know, we're finally seeing his more offensive sort of attributes, which we've missed in the last few years, in the last sort of season. But certainly, this game, I've given him an 8 because he showed his class. And hopefully, in the next few games, he can show how he can battle with the players. He can show more of his creativity and also just add more of his sort of his ability to and awareness to do stuff when he's not on the ball. So certainly an 8 for him, a very good performance. So now to move on to the front three, which consists of Wilfried Zaha, Christian Benteke and Andros Townsend. Obviously starting with the left winger Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give an 8.
It's just so good for you. 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 It's just so good for you.
First half he was very good. Second half he faded but came back in bursts. But arguably Palace's greatest threat. Zaha had a fantastic game, creating a number of opportunities that his teammates failed to capitalise on, but for going down too easily, which may have been a tad harsh. So obviously Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him an 8 because once again, one of our most consistent, best performing players this season in Wilfried Zaha has once again produced a fantastic performance. Now we talk about a game of two halves, or a player having a game of two halves. Zaha is a classic example of that. You know, in the first half we were very dominant because Watford, you know, they had two sort of early injuries and they weren't really playing that well, and obviously Zaha capitalised on that, and he was actually played really well in the first half, you know, running down the left flank rather than playing on the right. You know, he got a free kick early on in the game, got a corner, so, you know, he had a real impact on the game. And obviously, like most players, sometimes they have off games, they have a game of two halves, like I've said. You know, in the second half, Watford came back better, and it weren't the fact that we were worse, it was just Watford sort of were much better than they were in the first half, and it meant that he wasn't as effective as he was in the first half, but still he came out in bursts. You know, there were certain bits and glimpses of what he can do in the second half, and to be honest, he was probably Palace's greatest threat, and that's why I've given him an 8, because much like some of the midfield players, you know, it was a pretty decent performance from us. And whether that be sort of the fact that a new manager's come in and all of the players are trying to impress them, or whether it's just, you know, the impact of a new manager coming in, the fact that you want to please him, you want to do things like that, but certainly, you know, a game of two halves for Zaha, a very good first half, and then you know, not as good, because they weren't bad, but not as good second half, where he was still good in little aspects of it. But certainly, just to highlight the first half, I've talked about him being good and being the best attacking threat. But actually, like he always does, he's got 6 assists this season. He was once again looking, you know, to create opportunities for his teammates, whether that be a pass, or whether it be him cut inside and try and find a pass, whether it be he lay off to another player, link up with the fullbacks, whatever he was going to do, you know, he was trying to, you know, find opportunities for his other players rather than creating them for himself. And to be honest, you guys go on to talk about Christian Benteke, but most of the teammates, especially Benteke, failed to capitalise on these opportunities he was creating. So Zaha and Townsend, they were putting in loads of crosses, loads of passes, whatever you wanted them to do to supply all of the other players in the team. But actually, most of the teammates, like especially Benteke, and I must highlight it, you know, they failed to capitalise it on. And so, you know, you can understand we could have gone on to win the game if, you know, some of the other players were a bit more upper to the standard, let's say, of Zaha, Townsend, had the same performance, and then maybe they would have been able to capitalise, you know, on these crosses. But obviously, we talk about Mark Clattenburg being a controversial referee. Once again, he's booked Wilfried Zaha for simulation. You know, apparently he went down too easily in the box when he got pushed over. He got barged over by a Watford defender. He got booked for that, and that is 4 yellow cards for him this season, which if he had got another one, he would have been suspended. But because after Christmas they extend it to 10 yellow cards to get a ban, he's now sort of doesn't have to worry as much as getting suspended. But certainly that was a very harsh decision, because Sam Allardyce looked back at the replay, and that's the thing I like about Sam Allardyce. He doesn't just say it was a penalty because I saw it at the touchline. He goes straight into the dressing room, does this little speech to the players, but then he looks at a screen, he gets his analysts to show him videos from different angles of the incident, and that's what I like. He's not making excuses like Prodl did. He's actually got the evidence, and he looks at it and went, well, that's a penalty, you know, there's contact in the box, and if Clattenburg's going to give the one for Delaney where he's pulling back the defender, this one you've got to give it because he's pushing Zaha when he's trying to go through and goal. So actually, that should have been a penalty, and it's not a dive, because the rules say you get a penalty in the box if there's contact on a tackle. There was enough contact, there was contact there, he pushed Zaha to the floor, so there's no need, you know, to book him. And if you are going to say that it's, you know, not a good enough foul, which, okay, that's a fair enough point, you know, it's not a good enough foul to award a penalty, then just give the free kick but don't book the player, because you could just say to the player, well, no, I'm not going to give you the penalty because it was too soft, but you still did get fouled. So, you know, there's a bit of debate about it, and at the end of the day, the way I look at it is, if that foul would be given anywhere else on the pitch, then it needs to be given on the penalty box. It doesn't matter whether it's a soft penalty or a hard penalty, you know, penalty full stop. And to be honest, Clattenburg, I'll go on to talk about him a little bit in the summary at the end, but certainly he had a much better performance than he has done in past weeks, you know, playing advantages, doing things like that. But still, there's little controversial things he does, you know, letting tackles go, not letting some little touches like that go, booking players not properly. So all of these little things Clattenburg didn't do well, but certainly didn't affect Zaha's game, just made him more determined to go on and try and get something for the team, which ultimately we didn't go on to get something for the team, but certainly he put in a good shift. And all of this talk about, you know, the mascot diving in front of him, I think Allardyce is right in saying that the club, Watford and the FA, may have to take action. And I know they've said they won't take action, but is it really right for the mascot? So someone's dad dressed up as a bee, is it alright for him to really mock a player and piss them off? Nah, I don't think so. You know, Zaha took it, you know, he took it the other way. He was fine with it. He was all happy. But really, what's the point in mocking him, you know? I'm sure that if a player done that and went up to a player, he would be suspended or given a ban or given a fine for mocking the player. So if a mascot does it, you know, surely he should be doing it. You know, at the end of the day, it wasn't the dive, so the fact that the bee was mocking him isn't good. But certainly what Allardyce said, you know, it's morals. You know, you shouldn't be mocking people because, you know, it's not right. And certainly the bee done that. And certainly I'll go on to talk about, you know, in the next few weeks, if this sort of has affected Zaha's morale, the fact that he was mocked by the bee. But certainly Wilfried Zaha in 8, once again, one of Palace's most consistent players, you know, had a very decent first half, creating opportunities for other players, which no players did capitalise on. In the second half, he did fade, not up to the sort of standard and sort of pace he was in the first half, but certainly in bursts, especially when he ran through and got booked for the supposed dive. It just shows a classic example of where he came in bursts in the second half. But certainly an 8 for him is a decent result. Obviously, moving on now to the striker, Christian Benteke, who I'm going to give a 5. Did an okay job of leading the line and from open play, he had a header which he should have scored from early on, but missed a penalty which proved costly, as Palace would probably have gone on to win. That's 2 spot kicks he's missed this season. It's fair to say Palace fans expect a little bit more from the club's record signing. So Christian Benteke here, I've given him a 5, not because he necessarily had a bad performance, just because it wasn't, what we would have expected off of him. He is the club's record signing, and we would expect more from him. And we talked about Zaha, creating opportunities for his teammates and players not capitalising on that. Benteke, a classic example of that. He led the line pretty well. He done okay. He had to battle with the back line of Watford. But, from open play, he should have done better, really. From one of Zaha's crosses, Zaha got across from the left. Benteke, we know he's got the height. He managed to jump ahead of the defender, headed it down and just missed. So it's just showing that, yes, he was able to have an aerial presence and lead the line quite well. But, when he had an opportunity in open play to score, he missed it. And that just proves that, when you have a chance, if you don't have too many chances, when you have a chance, you need to take it. And obviously, Benteke didn't do it. But to be honest, other than sort of the fact that he missed that header, it was an alright performance, leading the line, so being the man up top, being the target man, balls were going into him, balls were, from crosses, from passes, and he done pretty well at holding up the ball. But to be honest, the main thing about his performance, and the reason I've given him the 5 is, he missed the penalty, and that proved costly. If Palace had scored that penalty, it would have been 2-0, and most people and pundits would say the game would have been dead and buried at half-time. But obviously, like I said, if he had scored that, we probably would have gone on to win, because it would have been 2-0. Watford's morale would have been quite low, and they probably wouldn't have gone on to do it. And to be honest, that's 2 penalties he's missed this season. And to be honest, only Tottenham have, we've missed maybe 4 penalties this season, or 3 penalties. Tottenham have also missed about the same. So it's just showing that, it's normal for clubs to miss penalties. I don't want to say it's normal, but it's not like we're the only club missing penalties. But still, it's a problem. Benteke's missed 2 this season. Kabay missed 1. So it's just showing that, we missed kicks. And to be honest, you must look at Benteke. Yes, he scored goals from headers. He scored goals with his feet. He's also scored 2 penalties. So yes, we criticise him for missing 2 penalties this season, especially the one against Watford, which was actually saved. So it wasn't like it was going off target. The keeper actually made a pretty good save. We could say he still can score penalties. He just maybe have to look at the technique. When he does that stuttered run up, maybe instead of just rolling it into the bottom corner or rolling it into, top corner, maybe he should try and just somehow get his sort of run up right so he can blast it. And he done that against us last season when he got the controversial penalty when Liverpool came to sell us the 1-2-1. That one, he blasted that one. He done his little run up and blasted that penalty into the corner. So if he had done that against Watford, Gomes probably wouldn't have been able to save it, because because the ball was going so slow, he was able to save it pretty well. But certainly, that's 2 he's missed this season. We would expect more from him. He is the club's record signing. We'd expect him to score more goals. And people are suggesting that Allardyce might not like him because, he hasn't scored. He's missed a penalty. He's missed opportunities, missed headers. But actually, I think that Allardyce is still sort of organising the squad. And once Allardyce sort of gets the full squad together, once the injured players have come back, once he sort of gets his sort of, let's say, plan enrolled into the side, I'm sure that players like Benteke can be more effective. And certainly, I think a game against Swansea coming up, I think that's a crucial game. Maybe Benteke should maybe try and get a few more goals in that game, just to prove to Allardyce how much of a good signing he is. Because to be honest, Prodl brought him in. He spent a lot of money on him, and he's proved us right. He's worth the money. He's scored goals with his head, his feet. He's scored penalties. But now he's got to try and do it under Allardyce as well to impress him. Otherwise, a new player may come in the transfer window. But certainly, Christian Benteke, a 5 for him. An under par performance from him. And although he done right with hold-up play and lead in the line, he should have done better with a header early on. And obviously the penalty as well. So, hopefully, with Allardyce sort of changing his style up sort of onto sort of, long balls, which Allardyce apparently likes to do, I'm sure that Christian Benteke will thrive under that. Obviously, moving on now to the final player, Andros Townsend, who I'm going to give an 8. Like Kabay, he was much better. Out of favour by Prodl, Townsend looked like a player that Palace signed in the summer. His work rate was a real positive, topped up by an excellent assist for Kabay's goal. Played in his preferred position on the right. Is this a fresh start he needs under Allardyce? So obviously, I've given Townsend an 8, and I suppose the first thing to sort of comment about, and I want you to comment below with what you think, is this a fresh start that Townsend needed under Allardyce? Because, under Prodl, Townsend was played out of position in order for Zaha to thrive on the right hand side, and when Townsend was playing on the left, he was pretty ineffective, and so he dropped morale and he got dropped from the side, wasn't even playing, you know, he was on the bench. So you could see his morale going down. But I think under Allardyce has seen what Townsend could do when he was in the England squad, when Allardyce was the England manager. So I think he's seen what Townsend can do, and he's seen that, you know, Townsend is significantly stronger on the right hand side. So obviously Allardyce played him on the right hand side, and what a difference he made. He was so much better in this game than he's been in other games. And you know, much like Kabai's playing now in a better position for himself, which suits his style of play better. And actually, it's improved both of these players very well. And I've talked about it already. Out of favour by Prodl, probably because he's not very versatile. That's why Prodl put him on the bench. The fact that he couldn't play on both the left and right wing. And I think that's why he was dropped by Prodl. And now this game especially, and maybe in the next few games he'll improve as well. But he looked like the player that Palace signed in the summer. So we signed an excellent English winger who scored 4 goals in half a season last season. You know, a guy who was constantly running at Newcastle, putting crosses in. So we signed a player with fantastic quality. And now in this game, we saw it in this game. You know, his work rate was fantastic like he was at Newcastle. It was real positive. So he kept going till the end, trying to get crosses, trying to get passes, trying to even cut inside and have a shot. And, you know, that was fantastic. That's what he'd done at Newcastle, and that's why we signed him. But he really, the thing about his performance and why I've given him an 8 is for the skill for the assist for Kabai's goal. So obviously it was really good to find the fact that he cut inside and found a space, and he found Kabai running in, so he slotted the ball to Kabai just onside so Kabai could score. You know, that pass was good as well. But in the run up to that, the build up to him getting the ball to Kabai, lovely bit of skill. He's surrounded by 3 players. You know, they're all trying to tackle the ball off of him. He flicks the ball up on his chest, spins around the defender, and then goes on a run down the right flank, cuts inside, then finds the pass to Kabai. So once again, just showing his absolute class. The fact that he can sort of volley the ball up the air, you know, chin it down, or sorry, chest it, spin past the defender. It's just showing his skill, and it's fantastic. And you know, we talk about him playing in his preferred position. I think that's the reason why he was able to find Kabai. The fact that he prefers cutting in from the right and shooting with his left foot, or passing with his left foot, and the fact that he was on the right hand side meant that it was easier for him, and he felt more comfortable, you know, trying to find Kabai. And to be honest, a very decent performance from him. You know, an 8 is fully deserved for him. You know, yes, he didn't get a goal, but the assist was fantastic. The work rate, he kept going to the end, was good as well. And to be honest, he's now turning into the signing that we signed in the summer. You know, hopefully, like he did at Newcastle, he can get a few goals, maybe a few free kicks, because you know, we know what he can do, and hopefully he's going to show it. But really, the final thing, really, you know, I've given him an 8. But the thing I'm really going to credit him for is actually got into the Premier League Team of the Week. And people may say, you know, there were other players better than him, but this is based on stats. So the fact that he got an assist, the fact that he was, you know, having many take-ons, the fact that he could get past players, the fact that he could put in crosses, and the fact that he'd done defensive work, all of these things are put together, and the number is combined, you know. A number is sort of blasted out, and that's how they work out the Premier League Team of the Week. And this is based on WhoScored.com stats. So if you do want to go on that website, I do recommend you do, because it's got sort of all the stats from all the Premier League teams, all of the Palace players. So if you go on there, it gives you ratings of how or who's been the best players for Palace this season. It goes through statistics like goals, assists, everything like that. Do go on there. And obviously him playing on the right, he got on the right hand side. He got the right winger for the Premier League Team of the Week. So it's just showing that he's got the quality. We know he's had, and now he's shown it by actually being ranked or rated one of the best right wingers of the weekend. But certainly, congratulations to him for getting in the Premier League Team of the Week, because it was a very decent performance from him. And if you look at the WhoScored.com stats, it was very close between him and Zaha. So it's once again showing that, you know, all of our players, they've got quality, so now we've just got to try and get results. And Townsend, Zaha, classic examples of that. Yeah, put in constant effort every week, and now Townsend got rewarded by actually being noticed in the Premier League Team of the Week. And certainly good performance from him. Obviously, now to move on to the substitutes. I'm not really going to talk too much about them because they weren't really on the pitch long enough, but they were Jordan March, Fraser Campbell. Obviously, Jordan March came on the pitch, didn't really make a difference to the way we played. And looking back at the game, we don't even think he touched the ball. And I think he may have had 1 or 2 touches, but none of them were successful. And actually, looking back, I probably think he had a free kick which he blasted right out for a goal kick. So it's just showing he didn't really have, you know, a good impact. Maybe 1 or 2 touches, yeah, we'll talk about that. And to be honest, you want substitutes to A, come on to sort of preserve the fitness of other players, but B, to come on to make an impact on the game. You know, he came on in the second half. Palace were looking to get the winner, to try and get the result. And obviously, classic example, he's got the free kick, done nothing with it. He had a few chances to sort of link up with players and get forward. He wasn't really doing that. So he didn't really make an impact in helping Palace look for the winner. Same with Fraser Campbell. You've thrown on a forward to try and get a goal. much like much, he didn't really have an impact on the game. The only thing really I'll credit Fraser Campbell for is the fact that he constantly chases down players, and he done that against Watford's back line. And he kept going, kept running at them, putting pressure on them, but he didn't really do much else. So that's the only thing I like about Fraser Campbell. Yes, people may say he's not that good of a striker, but whenever he's on the pitch, he chases down players, puts pressure on them, and tries to create opportunities. But much like much, he didn't really have as much impact as he would have liked on the game. But certainly an alright performance from him. And I've said this past week's most, I've never really discussed this much, but I personally think with Campbell's sort of pace, he's got the crossing ability we saw in pre-season, the fact that he chases players down, I would like to see him played on the wing role. I don't know whether he'd be better on the right or the left, but I certainly think using his pace, using his shooting ability, I think that we should consider playing Campbell out wide when the likes of Zaha go off to the African Cup of Nations, because I actually think it might help him improve as a player and actually get a place in the first team squad, because Benteke is a very good striker. It's going to be very hard for Campbell to get back into the side, so I think maybe Campbell's future is as a winger, because he's got the pace, so I think he could do it. But to be honest, just to sort of summarise the game as a whole, I normally give ratings for the whole team. I'm going to give 7s all round, for the defence, midfield and the attack. The defence was significantly better than it's been in past weeks, and it's progressively getting better, and it can only get even better under Allardyce, because like I've said already, he's a very defensive minded manager, and it was the defence, you could see how good the defence was, the fact that they were doing simple stuff, making tackles, making blocks, and ultimately that's what Allardyce will bring to the side, and that's why I've given the defence a 7. Very good performance from them. Obviously the midfield as well, we talk about the defence being good. One of the reasons why they're so good, or why they were so good in this game, was the fact that the midfield, they sort of positioned themselves just in front of the back line, just to give them cover, and that meant that when Watford were on the counter-attack, it wasn't one-on-one against defenders. You had a bit of cover there from the midfield as well, and also supplied the attackers, and that's what's crucial. You can't just put long balls up to the wingers or up to the striker for them to do stuff with it. You've got to have the midfield linking up with them, and that's what the midfield done. The likes of Punchin and Cabaye get the ball from the defenders, try and distribute it to the wingers. So that sort of link-up play means that we have a good impact on the game. But certainly giving cover to the back line and also supplying the attackers, I think a 7 for the midfield. And also the attack, we created lots of chances, especially with the two wingers, so Townsend, Zaha, running down the wings, getting crosses in, creating opportunities. And yes, Benteke did miss the penalty. He's still done pretty good with the headering and also with this hold-up play. So the fact that he's getting passes, created and getting the chances created from the wingers and doing stuff with it is good, and that's why I've given the attack a 7. But to be honest, just to summarise the game really, Palace, unlike in last sort of few games, we played with intensity, we didn't stop to the end, and there was actually a resemblance of organisation. Under Alan Pardew, it looked like there wasn't organisation, players didn't know what they were doing. This game, you could see the organisation, you could see that players knew where they had to be. And to be honest, we talk about players knowing where that to be. Allardyce sort of opted to play Yohan Cabaye in a more advanced role when he played Townsend, or put Townsend back into the squad. Them sort of two decisions worked really well, because it meant that Cabaye could create chances, Townsend as well, getting crosses in, and both these players excelled. So maybe Allardyce can get the best out of these players, and along with Zaha, he was Allardyce found the best way to get the best out of him. And obviously, one of the crucial things from the game, Benteke's penalty cost us. It was another shambolic attempt. The fact that he tried to do his little shimmy, he should have just done something simple and just blasted it down the middle, and it could have won us the game. So it was shambolic the fact, it was shambolic the fact that he missed it, and that it's crucial because it could have won us the game. But to be honest, it did cost us. So in the next few games, Allardyce has said they've done this in training. Hopefully, Benteke practicing his sort of hard blasting penalties in training, so that if we do get a penalty against Arsenal, against Swansea, then he can take them. And the final thing really is Mark Clanberg. We talk about him being one of the most controversial, worst referees, let's say, in the whole of football, especially in the Premier League. And to be honest, he had a better game than usual. And yes, he did wrongly book Zaha and let some tackles go, and didn't give away, and he let some tackles go, so hard tackles, and then some soft tackles he booked people for, or gave them as fouls. That was the only bad thing about his performance. And the one thing that's better than usual is playing the advantage. He's the man who cost us the FA Cup final. His inability to play an advantage meant that, we Wickham's goal in the FA Cup final wasn't allowed, and obviously Mark Clattenburg tried his best to play advantages in this game, and actually he did make the game flow quite a lot. But certainly he did wrongly book Zaha. But now obviously because you can't appeal yellow cards, we're just going to have to stay with it. And because they've sort of moved up the threshold for getting us suspended for yellow cards, it's up to 10 cards now. Zaha can relax a little bit more. But certainly a good team performance with intensity and organisation. And to be honest, just to summarise it all, a good start to Allardyce's reign as the Palace manager. So now to move on to the Man of the Match award. But before we do that and give you my Man of the Match and who I thought had the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the results on my Twitter poll. So obviously if you do want to vote in next week's Twitter poll, then of course you can follow my personal Twitter account, which is at the CPC Podcast, because the poll isn't run by Crystal Palace. But if you do want to vote in it and have your opinion heard on who you thought the best player was throughout the game and who had the biggest influence, then of course you can go on to my Twitter account, which once again is at the CPC Podcast, and vote in the Twitter poll. This week, past week we found it hard to narrow it down to 4 people, and this week actually it was quite hard again because there were 1 or 2 people who missed out. Notably, Joe Ledley was the main one who quite a few people commented about, they should have been in the list. But I narrowed it down to 4 people. In past weeks we haven't really had, or there's only been 2 or 3 people who have been good enough. But in this week, it was an all-round good team performance with organisation, intensity. So, and if I had on Twitter, if you could put more than 4 nominations, I probably would have put the whole team so we could see what people thought of the whole team as a whole. But certainly, the 4 nominations I've narrowed it down to was Matthew Flamini, Yohan Cabaye, Andros Townsend and Wilfried Zaha. So starting in 4th place with 7% of the votes was Andros Townsend. Closely followed up in 3rd place with 13% of the votes, Matthew Flamini. The runner-up for this week's Man of the Match in 2nd place with 31% of the votes was Yohan Cabaye, which means the winner of this week's Man of the Match poll for the game against Watford was Wilfried Zaha with an impressive 49% of the votes. So congratulations, Wilfried. You win this week's Twitter poll Man of the Match, and you don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was a very solid performance by you. And I'll go on to talk about, personally, I'll say it now, Zaha's won my Man of the Match because I thought he was the best attacking threat throughout the game, and he also won the Sky Man of the Match, and I'll go and give you some stats about that. But before I do that, I'll just give you a rundown of why I've put the other players in there. Obviously, Matthew Flamini, he's come into the side, he's used his experience to have very good defensive work, so playing that anchor role in front of the back 4, giving them protection. And that's the main thing that won us the game. The fact that we were defensively strong wasn't just because the defence were good, but it's the fact that, you had the midfielders giving protection. Yohan Cabaye, when a player scores a goal, normally they're going to be in contention. He scored the goal and he was probably one of Palace's best attacking threats along with Zaha and Townsend. The fact that he was playing in an advanced role, he could get forward, try and have shots, and also his set pieces deliveries were good. And obviously, I've talked about this in the past, and so have pundits online, on Match of the Day and shows like that. His passing's pretty good as well. So yes, his set piece deliveries are pretty accurate, but also his passing, his ability to find a player is good as well. And obviously, Andros Townsend, I've talked about Yohan Cabaye getting the goal. The assist for Yohan Cabaye was even better. The assist that Townsend gave to Cabaye, that lovely sort of twist and turn past 3 players, that lovely run, the lovely cut inside and the lovely pass just onside to find Cabaye was fantastic. And much like Cabaye and Zaha, Townsend was a constant attacking threat, and you can see by the way that the poll's gone, quite a lot of people thought that these 4 players had a pretty good game. And Zaha, much like all of the attacking players, he was attacking threat down the right, constantly kept running, trying to create chances and things like that. But certainly you can see here by these 4 players, the way that people voted for him, there was no sort of clear standout winner because, it was quite narrow in the fact that all of the players were quite close together, in their percentages. So it just shows that actually most people think that the whole team had a pretty decent performance. But I'm going to give it to Wilfried Zaha. So congratulations, Wilfried. Man win my personal Man of the Match for the game against Watford. But, you also won the Sky Man of the Match. And the reason you did do that, and I'll just go through a few of the stats here. He had 1 attempt on goal, 44 touches, he had 23 duels, he had 6 fouls won, he had 51 sprints, and also he covered a distance of 8.97 kilometres. So just showing that actually what an impact he had on the game. The fact that he had an attempt, he was having touches all around the pitch, he was running past players in duels, he was winning fouls by, being clever, using his tricks. He was sprinting down the left flank, and you can see that. And also the distance coverage, it's not people think Zaha is just one of these wingers who runs down the flank. Actually, he runs quite a lot of distance defending as well. You know, he runs back and defends. But certainly, all of these players, you know, Flamini, Cabaye, Townsend, Zaha, they all had a pretty decent performance. But the reason, you know, Zaha stands out for me personally is the fact that he was a constant threat. And you can see that in the player rankings. You know, all of these players got pretty high rankings, 7s and 8s. But Zaha stood out for me because he was a constant threat down that wing. And hopefully, you know, he can improve, and with him going to the African Cup of Nations, hopefully that can help him to, you know, develop more as a player. But now you've heard my match report, player rankings, and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Sam Allardyce, Johan Cabaye, and Scott Dan following the game.
Scott, a point away from home before the game, you know, after recent events, probably you'd have looked to come away from the game unbeaten, and that's exactly what we've done.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we can't win, make sure we don't lose the game. That's the way it's ended up. But when you look at the whole game, chances and decisions, we maybe dropped 2 points here today. But like I say, it's a point away from home, and we've got to take the positives.
Under the new manager, good, very solid first half performance, and at half time we could have been coming in with a bigger lead than we did. Yeah, and I think we should have, and I think maybe if the penalty goes in or one of the other chances go in, gain more confidence and hopefully see the game out. Can't remember Watford having too many shots on goal, and especially until they scored the penalty. And maybe we could have had another penalty shout in the second half on Wilf as well. So yeah, it does feel like 2 points drops, but it was especially in the first half, solid performance and something to build on with the new manager in charge. Been talking about defending better as a group and more resilience amongst the team out on the pitch when things are going against you. They equalised, but we did that well at the end of the game. Yeah, that's a positive, and I think the manager's only been in for a couple of days, and I'm sure that's something we'll work on as a team as the weeks go by, and we'll become more resilient and better at that. And when we do get ahead like we did, we'll see more games out, and hopefully the points will start coming. Now before next weekend's game, a full week on the training ground with the new manager, that's going to be really beneficial for the whole group. Yeah, definitely. Don't play again for another 6 days. I think it is. Gives us more time to work on the way we're going to set up for the Arsenal game, and hopefully we can put in another performance more similar to what we did in the first half, and start getting some more points on the board. Right, Scott, thanks so much. Cheers. Yeah, and firstly, your reflection on that point here at Vicarage Road.
Well, when I get this point, of course, but I think, especially after the first half, for me, we lost 2 points today. But anyway, in our run, I think this point will be important for the next games, for the future, to build something. So, yeah, of course, I think it's more positive than negative today.
Particularly, as you say, in that first half, you got the goal. You must have been delighted to get on the end of the ball from Andros.
Yeah, of course. It's always nice, personally, to score, and yeah, but I would prefer to win the game at the end. But I will get that goal, and I hope it will give me some more confidence for the future.
You mentioned all about confidence. I mean, them bringing the game on level terms, and then us actually holding on for getting a draw out of it at the end after what's happened in recent weeks. That's another positive, isn't it? It's all about that building that confidence.
Yes, as I said, 1 point it's better than nothing. But when you look at the first half, I think we could expect more than a point. But we've got something to build on for the future, and I hope it will help us.
And of course, at this time of year, the fixtures come thick and fast. I mean, next weekend we've got Arsenal away and then Swansea at home. They're important games, and it's the point of building on things at the moment.
Of course, we know that period is a tough period, so just need to take care of ourselves and get some rest. But yeah, I mean, I think it could be positive for the future, the game today, and as I said, to give us some confidence and just try to get some more positive results.
And just a word on the other penalty decisions. Obviously, Christian missed his one in the first half, and you say it could have pushed us on at half time, and then that late call on a possible pen against Wolf.
I don't know. So you have to respect the ref's decision, but yeah, of course it's hard because we could have get 2 goals at half time and just lead for 2-0. Well, that's the life, that's football, that's the game, and we had 45 more minutes to score, but fortunately the second half wasn't as good as the first one, so that's it, and we have to carry on and just keep working out for the next game.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Sam, first post-match interview as Palace manager, and it's certainly a game that I'm sure you're leaving thinking we could have got more out of.
Yeah, it's a disappointing 2 points drop for me today, and I think that it's quite encouraging in some ways to say that away from home, you as the manager, the new manager, are disappointed in a draw, not a victory. But you know that means there's been a lot of positives I've seen out there today. I mean, the sad thing for us is the first shot on target today for Watford was the penalty they scored, and that shows you how much it was going to get. That looks like we were going to get an all-important 1-0 victory, because you know clean sheets have one of the things where we've let ourselves, or the club's let themselves down before I came. So that 1-0 victory today and putting the second clean sheet on the board would have been vital. It was given away by us, not the creativity from Watford. And in saying all that though, we still could have won it with the Wilfried Zaha penalty, which unfortunately wasn't given. So we could have got that 3 points. I am encouraged by the performance, particularly in the first half, but a little disappointed on the fact that we missed a penalty ourselves. They scored off a penalty, and really we dominated the game for long periods of time, and that hasn't brought us a victory that a performance like this should normally bring.
You mentioned the penalty that we missed, obviously with Christian, but with any player out on the pitch, he stands up there and takes the penalty. Disappointing that it didn't help us to extend the lead for half time.
Well, I mean, the 2 turning points in the game today were us missing the penalty at that stage and them scoring a penalty when they did, and that's probably the reason why. There's a lot of other reasons, but bigger reasons in terms of why we haven't won 3 points today.
And of course, only coming into the club now, sort of 48 hours or so from the start of the weekend, but sort of reflections on things as a group of players.
I think that for me, there's the players here as the amount of Premier League experience that they have, and a united front and a more resilient front. A little bit more work defensively would, and certainly defensively it worked today. Apart from the penalty we gave away, and that will then we'll then see the flair players that we've got, and you've seen them today. It hasn't, you know, we've defended well. It hasn't detracted from the quality of Cabaye and Townsend and certainly Wilfried Zaha, you know, and Jason Punch, and they're the ones who can attack and open the door and create chances for our team, and obviously Kabul and what we were doing today should have been great, and obviously to get on the end of it, Christian Benteke. So if we can balance it off the defensive side, the attacking side, which I think has just been the problem recently, then we will, you know, pick up more points.
And obviously frustration today with Damien getting the yellow card for the booking, which now means he's suspended. And with that suspension and the number of injuries, they're sort of early frustrations for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets more than frustrating. I mean, it is a silly, soft penalty to give away, and you know, we all know about what's been talked about holding today. But in the end, you know, it's cost us again because he won't be available for the next game, which is Arsenal, because he's picked up his 5th booking. So the penalty's hard enough, and picking up the booking as well means he's now suspended, like, you know. So you know, I have to say that's the one. From my point of view, that's the one disappointing thing that happened with my team today.
But going into those 2 games next weekend and a full week now on the training pitch, it's plenty of positives to take from the visit of Vicarage Road.
Absolutely. Well, I think that one thing we've got to do is keep the players fit. We've got too many players injured at the minute. We've got Delaney who's suspended now, and if you looked at our bench today, it was, in terms of strength and depth, there's a couple of kids on there at the end, so we've got to try and get these players who are injured fit as quickly as possible, and that'll help us cope better with the very difficult programme we've got going into the back end of December and January.
Sam, thanks very much. Cheers.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Sam Allardyce, Johan Cabaye and Scott Dan had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Watford. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Arsenal. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace!